Hello and welcome to this edition of our Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and joining us in studio for this show is the Executive Minister of the Interchurch Council of Greater New Bedford. Almost a year to the day he was in here last time, the Rev Dave Lima. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
I brought you in because it is almost to the day that you came in last year, and this is the second Easter season, if you will, that we have had to endure COVID during this really most religious time in the calendar.
Definitely for the Christian community, the Catholic community, Greek Orthodox community. I believe it's next week. It is definitely the holiest season. You know, we celebrate Christmas, but the celebration of being a Christian and the hope for eternity is the fact that Christ died and rose again. That's what we celebrate on Easter, or Resurrection Sunday, as many would prefer to refer it to. And I remember last year when we talked about this.
And you had plans and everything. You were all set, getting things ready.
Well, we had Easter sunrise service getting planned. We've done that 81 years in a row at Fort Phoenix.
Yep.
You've been there.
Yeah.
And the thing is last year we had gotten the orders that stay at home. We couldn't do it. But I remember talking back then, very naively, that we were hoping that maybe by July we'd have a service out there, and maybe we'd do a mass baptism or something to that effect. Right. And of course, COVID did what it did, and we're only now starting to see the doors opening up to normalcy. And we still got a way to go. So here we are again, a second Easter, that we won't be able to have a normal in-church presence. Some churches still haven't even opened up, and definitely those that are very limited in terms of percentages of people that can be attending.
When you said eternity, living for eternity, the only thing I could think of too was when you said the word eternity, I'm like, this must feel like an eternity in your church life.
Oh, it does. Because this is not normal. The whole thing behind faith community is the gathering together of those that are faithful. And that goes for every denomination and every faith. You know, being able to celebrate Passover together in the Jewish community.
Which is happening, just started.
It just started, and Ramadan's coming up. And you've got so many other gatherings that people come and celebrate. I mean, let's face it, last year, weddings were truncated, if not canceled and postponed for a later time when people could have a normal celebration. And you had people that died, as we all know.
Right.
And people couldn't visit and couldn't have normalcy even in our grieving process.
I want to ask this question, and it's strictly, I guess, a business question, because I want to talk about just the impact that the churches have and what have you. But business-wise, how has this pandemic impacted the business side of religion?
So if you're talking about support that would normally come into the church, if you're talking about the outreach that normally would happen from the church, everything has been affected. There's no getting around it. Speaking for myself and what I did for my congregation, which is a congregation of about 100 people, give or take, we all learned tech, whether you knew tech or didn't know tech.
Right.
And Zoom took a whole new meaning for many of us. And first there was what you could do online so that you could reach your people, since people weren't coming to you. And for a lot of us, we were scrambling. We used Facebook Live. We used another online streaming platform. Some churches did YouTube services. They would tape for YouTube, and we'd be able to upload it so that anybody could access them. And the interesting thing, of course, is like, for instance, my own, whereas I have about 100 people plus, give or take, there were, when you looked at the metrics of the online services, I would have 3, 4, 5 times the amount of people that would actually watch the service that never showed up in the building,
Yep.
So, on the one hand, you believe you're reaching everybody, but on the other hand, like when you watch a TV show or a football game or something else, if you got to get up to go grab something to eat or grab a drink or whatever, you don't know how many people are actually there in the presence, listening to the word that's being preached, doing things like that. So you don't know how your people are being affected. One of the things that I did, especially with everything I've learned working with folks in mental health and everything else, is that the isolation was crippling for a lot of folks.
Yep. Especially elderly.
Especially the elderly,
Yep.
but a lot of young people too. The kids not being able to go to school. I got a granddaughter that graduated elementary school, and they always make a big thing out of that. And all of a sudden, she wasn't even able to say goodbye to her friends.
Right.
I had another granddaughter who was pre-K, and they make a big thing for the little kids, and that didn't take place. But it just made it difficult.
Is the financial end of things? You look at businesses that are struggling right now, and I would assume that churches are in the same boat. Does that mean that there are churches that could close?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not saying locally. I'm just saying in general.
No, I think in general, period, locally for sure.
Okay.
Not that I can give you any names.
No, and I'm not looking.
But
I'm
I
just
know
curious.
some that are struggling.
Really? Yeah.
I know some that are merging. I know some that are discussing, what things are going to happen, and some people are just trying to figure it out. The support that would come. Now, many churches, different churches, different faiths use different methods of fiscal giving.
Well, I'm just thinking too. Even the Easter holiday season
Yep.
is a huge financial time for churches.
It is.
Because people, there's that old argument, and not argument, but there's the old saying that people go to church twice a year. Some people.
C&E Christians, Christmas and Easter.
Exactly.
They show up, and you're right. I mean, attendance definitely goes up during those times, and I'm not trying to judge anybody for where they are and what they're doing, but you're right. There are times that more offerings are able to take place. It's one thing when you're able to talk in the church and say, our heating bill is way up this year because of the cold, which we did have that this year.
Yeah.
And though you could keep the temperature lower, you still had some heating bills, and so you couldn't necessarily make special appeals unless you were sending letters or anything else. When people are there, they take out the checkbook, or they go into their pockets. But if they're not there, then you're trying to reach them through some electronic viewing, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I know some churches that are actually doing a little bit better financially at the moment, and I know other churches that are doing worse.
I looked at a stat that I saw in the paper too. It was a Gallup survey. It says those who prioritize weekly attendance at worship services throughout the pandemic have emerged mentally improved. Mm-hmm. I found that to be very interesting. It was 4%, I guess, but it was important for mental health.
Like I said earlier, one of the things that I'm heavily involved in is suicide prevention in this city. I work and have been part of trauma response in this city during traumatic events. But the one thing, working with the collaborative community, we have recognized the fact that there was a lot of issues between depression, isolation, people that were having a difficult time. Now, with some, you can do different things. I actually did a 7 o'clock Zoom check-in with my church and anybody that wanted every night the first few months. Then we cut it back a little. I still meet twice a week with whoever.
And this is based too on whether you're there actually at the church or doing some online service. If you're just involved, I found that
because there's some normalcy.
Yeah.
And of course, when you have faith, there's the hope of what's to come. That's one of the things about being a person of faith, is that, okay, I see what we're going through. I mean, Psalm 23, that whether you're a Christian or not, you've probably heard it one time or another. Though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I will fear no evil because you're with me.
Right.
But see, sometimes I need to be reminded of that when I'm going through a dark period. And so if I'm home alone, there's nobody there to remind me. If I'm getting together with you, even if it's just for a cup of coffee, or I'm listening to others, whether it's electronically in the building or whatever, now I'm being encouraged, and I'm realizing I'm not alone.
Subsequently, too, which was interesting, Pew Research shows actively religious adults are more happy, volunteer, and are more civically involved. And that's not just with this, that's overall.
It is. And again, because you are practicing it when you're working it. When you continue to go to church, you're greeting people. Some churches do really well getting people involved. Other churches at least have people that are reaching out to everyone. Then when you make an appeal, I mean, if somebody asks for a volunteer right now in the community, somebody may or may not do it. But if somebody they know who's connected and knows a need and says, hey, we need some hands because we're going to be handing out food at a pop-up this week. Because that was one of the big struggles that occurred in this past year. It was like, hey, I can show up and give you an hour. How about deliveries? We got some shut-ins that can't come out. Some elderly people that are staying away. You had volunteers that would come out.
We had Pam Keechler on talking from
Yes,
PACE,
Pam
was saying that they
great.
had too many volunteers at one point.
Exactly.
They couldn't, because of COVID, they couldn't handle all the people that were volunteering.
But you had more people that were available.
Right.
Because some were out of work, some weren't, and some people just wanted to give. They wanted to be able to interact.
The number of people who, and this is not a surprise, number of people who attended services in 2020 declined. Obviously, that's because of the pandemic. Another interesting stat, all but 3% of all churches in the United States closed last March. And as of late 2020, 4 out of 5 churches have returned to in-person service. Attendance, though, is 36% of normal capacity. That's nationwide. But I assume those numbers are still COVID related, or what have you.
You still have restrictions even in this state. A church can be open to 50% of its capacity. You still have to be socially distant. You still have to be, people 6 feet away, things like that. So,
and as big as a church building is, and again, I'm generalizing now because every church size is different, I get that, but you can fit some people in there, but as big as they are, you still have that space, so you're going to be limited.
Well, for instance, you have, I was talking to Father Jack Oliveira, who is pastor at the Mount Carmel Catholic Church on Rivet Street. Mount Carmel is one of your larger churches in the city. He can only have 200 people in the pews per service. Whereas he's got a capacity that could probably, if everybody's crammed in like holidays like this would be, you probably could take 700-800 people without a problem.
And you have multiple services in his case.
Exactly. And so even he, when they were able to open at first, he was only able to take in 100 people. And it was difficult because you'd have to register online. And if you didn't register, you couldn't get a seat, because it was the only fair way to do it. People showing up, it was difficult. And they would make an appeal, don't register every week so somebody else can have an opportunity, things like that. But I also am concerned that a lot of people have gotten out of the habit.
Right, every Sunday morning or Saturday, whatever
joining.
It is. Right.
Yeah, and so I don't know how recent that one is. I know you said it was recent, but I was listening to a radio program on my way in from home down to my office, and they were talking about it today because things have changed, and priorities are different, and life is different. And
well, how much is that too? Is your upbringing? I look at my parents, my mother in particular, always went to church on Sundays.
Yep. Priorities.
And that's something that obviously for us, for me, up to a point, my mother, when you got to a certain age, she wasn't going to push you anymore.
Right.
You made your own decisions. But as a youngster, you went to church.
Again, for many in
Wasn't
the
even an
audience,
option.
even yourself, no, there was no option. And I was raised Catholic. I was very involved. And, it was Sunday mornings. You went, period. Then the big new thing was Saturday evening could fulfill your obligation. And so, especially during the summer, we'd go on Saturday evening rather than Sunday morning so that we could have a beach day. The family would go down to local state park.
But I was just going to say with Sunday morning too, with us, and I'm sure it was for like that in many households too.
Yep.
It was Sunday morning, probably late Sunday morning, you'd go to mass or church, and then you'd have the family dinner.
Family dinner at noontime.
On Sundays.
Oh, yes. But see, again, going back to as old as I am, you had the blue laws. See, blue laws existed so that families did not have to worry about anything except going to church.
Yeah.
That was the point behind it. And as life started to shift, more people were working. They were working Saturdays as well as during the week. The blue laws got changed. And
Right.
I remember I was a young man, but I was one of the supervisors in a local supermarket when the law changed. And even when the law changed, it was still only from noontime to 5 that
Correct.
you could be open.
Yep.
And now Sunday is the busiest day of commerce in the United States. But the blue laws, you didn't have a lot of things that were open. You went to church.
Right.
You went to church in the morning. Sometimes you went back to church at night. You had Sunday dinners at home, or you had Sunday picnics with the church. All of that was together. And then things started to change. There was a lot more available to us, a lot more that you could see on TV, a lot more entertaining things. As the blue laws changed, life shifted. And then people started reprioritizing. And so the next generation diluted a little bit, the next generation dilutes a little bit. And now, the survey that I was hearing was saying millennials are only about 35% claim to be churched.
Interesting stat right here as you bring that up. Barna, which is a Christian research firm, found that 79% of practicing Christians went to church pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. Seems a pretty high number.
Yep.
The number now is 51% during COVID, and there is obviously fear that number won't reach pre-COVID levels.
It's definitely a concern. I mean, I've got some families, though I try to reach out and make phone calls, or they comment during a service online or whatever. There's some families that I haven't seen in a while.
Yeah.
And so you try to connect and you try to be in there. Some it's because they haven't had vaccines, they haven't had anything else, they don't want to get together with anybody except what they absolutely have to do.
And it seems, and in my case, and I talked to off camera about it, Father Mike with me, and he knows
Yep.
our situation. It's like, that's fine. We'll wait.
Well,
do you think that when, in my case, I haven't got the vaccine yet.
Yep.
And do you think that people will go back?
No, I believe that I don't think the numbers are going to stay as low as they are.
Okay.
Will they be pre-COVID? I think we're going to see some new faces, people that went through something and found that faith really helped them through it.
And that's what I would think that in this circumstance too, that faith is a huge part of life right now, because it's been, for so many families, it's been a very difficult time. I mean, I'm not talking just life and death. I'm talking lost jobs or just health issues or what have you, depression.
Yeah.
The role of faith seems to me to have been for people an important part of this whole situation?
I believe in it. Okay, and obviously that's
I hope so.
my life. So, yeah, I guess that was a kind of a silly statement, but the fact of the matter is, if you don't have hope, then you're struggling. Period. And so we've got to find our faith in something, and for man is always looking for the eternal, and trying to understand everything. And unless you're someone who is atheistic and or scientific, and you need to have an answer for everything, it's difficult to say faith is the answer. But for me, and I've seen it way too many times, once people start believing in something greater than themselves, and that's an eternal God, it gives them some hope. And as they come to learn and study the Scriptures, there's answers in the Bible. Do we get all the answers we want? No. But that helps us understand, too, that having faith is not a panacea of life. It's not going to make everything go away, but it helps us to overcome. It helps us to be triumphant. It helps us to understand what we need to do, and it helps us even more so to be able to get closer in relationship, not only with God, but as he says, with each other.
Talk to me for a second here from your role. Obviously, you have a relationship with lots of people, and especially with your job.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to call it a job,
yeah,
but
no,
it's
I
a
understand.
calling, but with your job that you have,
Right.
will you be telling people to get the vaccines, that this will help them?
I will. And I'll tell you for a variety of reasons, not just as a faith leader.
Because I know churches, there are some religious, and I'm not specific to anything, but there are those that don't want to get involved in that.
There are some that don't want to get involved. I think there's way too many conspiracy theories out there. I was talking to somebody yesterday who's not churched, who started telling me about how he's been doing his research, and there's this one doctor in Belgium. And that drives me crazy. When all of this started a year ago, I told people, do not get your information off Facebook and all these other social medias, because there's too many conspiracy theorists out there. The bottom line is, and this is where Dave gets his certainty. I was born in 1957. I remember, even as a young child, hearing about and knowing about people that had to live in iron lungs because of how crippling polio was. Mm-hmm. And the different other things that we feared when I was a child, like mumps and scarlet fever, that all of a sudden you hardly hear anything about it at all anymore.
Right.
And why? Because of vaccines. Now, this one may cause a little bit more consternation because it was quick. But, the fact of the matter is, if you really do some of the studying and look at some of the things, they had been working on the genetics of vaccines already. I don't purport to be a scientific whiz, but the bottom line is, I've seen where polio was practically eradicated, and it's very, very rare you even hear about it at all.
It's like measles for us.
Exactly.
I remember as a small kid, and I was born a little after you, but not that much.
Yep.
And we had the measles shot.
Yep.
And
do some people get affected by shots? Yes. But the bottom line is, for me, I believe that the vaccines will help transform us, will help get us back to a place that we will have more normal circumstances. When you look at the history of what happened in 1918 with the Spanish flu, they didn't have any of that, and it took 2.5 years of a lot of death, a lot more than what we've seen now. And we don't need to go through that. But we need to get past where we are. And so I encourage folks. I'm telling that to my church. I'm telling it to anybody that wants. I'm telling community leaders that in the health department, in the mayor's office, the hospitals, get some PSAs out there. Get some people who people recognize that say, hey, I got the vaccine. I'm okay. You'll be okay. Then we'll all be in a much better place. I got my vaccine. I got the Moderna. I got the first shot and the second shot. I had a sore arm a little bit. I had the chills after the second shot for a day. I had some fatigue, but I had nothing else. I know people that have had no issues at all, but the bottom line is now I have more confidence. I'm out there in the community. I never stopped. I never stopped, but I think we definitely need to do that.
I've known you a long time. You're a very optimistic person. When things do get back to, and I use normal loosely, but in quotation marks, are you optimistic about the way faith and people react to faith will be at that time?
I believe so, because there's been a lot of people of faith that have been involved all along. And I think once people, it's like when you haven't been to your, I hate to put it this way, but let's put it this way. When you haven't been to your favorite restaurant in a while, and then all of a sudden you go, it's like memories. It's like, this is what we used to do. This is, it's all that restored. And I think there's going to be this, maybe not a rush at first, because everybody's going to have their hesitancy. But when they start, it's going to feel right. It's going to be right. And people are going to say, man, we missed this. And yeah, we need to be back. And I think that there'll be, I do think. Now, whether it'll be the same, whether it'll be worse, or whether it'll be better in terms of numbers and everything else, I think that'll take time. But I think overall, quite frankly, I think there's enough going on in this world and enough uncertainty that people getting connected to their houses of faith, being involved with each other, is going to give you a whole lot more peace of mind and a whole lot strength of spirit than we have right now. And I think that's something we all want.
You're not a medical expert, I know, but would you be, if I said you were optimistic about Christmas, would that be a safe assumption? I mean, Easter, this is the second one, but do you think we'd go through?
I'm believing that we'll have the new normal, if not the complete normal, by Christmas. I'm hoping and believing for the fall. Okay. I think that vaccines rolling out, more people having confidence in them, the whole herd immunity thing. I think the restrictions starting to be lifted and things starting to happen. I think we will. I think human beings are a resilient group, and I think that though changes do happen, we make do with the changes, and we will, when we're able to, we will celebrate. That's something we definitely do.
We're going to leave it at that. It's good seeing you again. Thanks for coming in. Like I said, it's been an interesting year, and I know it's been for you because you have been all over the place.
Yeah, it has. Do I have 30 seconds?
You have 30 seconds.
So here's something that I do want to make people aware of. About a month ago, Buddy Andrade gave me a call, and he said, Reverend, something we want to do is victims, but not necessarily a victim. He does a Victims of Homicide month every year. He says a remembrance and memorial of those we've lost and celebration of those who've survived COVID. So from May 20th to June 20th will be a month to celebrate that. They're going to have, they'll kick it off with a service with different ministers down at Montes Park on May 20th. There'll be more information coming out about that. Socially distant and all that, but we'll be able to do that. And as the faith community in general, we're looking at a much larger one that will be taking place Memorial Day weekend on that Sunday night. Location to be announced. But it's to be able to help remember those we've lost during COVID, whether it was to COVID or something else, because again, we weren't able to do normal wakes and funerals, and then a celebration of getting through it together and being able to look forward to the future.
We'll look forward to the details.
We will get you them as soon as possible.
All right. Good seeing you.
Good seeing you, and thank you very much.
That's going to do it for this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.